Am I a job hopper? King of innovation. My parents are Cantonese and Vietnamese, and I was born in California. Like, I don't know what's happening right now. Went to the beach and the mall, watched a lot of movies. If you crack it for yourself, it'll help you open up to innovation.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Anthony is What If Greater China Lead and Accenture Managing Partner, and AKA King of Innovation. Anthony, whenever I'm looking for the speaker's profile, I'm going first to LinkedIn and check all the past experiences. And I was scrolling through your past experiences. There were plenty of companies, but one thing that stands out is all the companies that you work for are innovation, creative agencies, and all the logos are black and white. What is the link between innovation company and black and white logo?
Wow. Very interesting thing that you noticed that because LinkedIn has that thing where it pulls in the logos automatically, right? And actually, when I worked at those different agencies, they weren't always black and white. Some of them started out like red or blue and green. There were some very like semiotics of the different colors for what it was signifying, like being different, standing out, or being like blue sky thinking, I think, at the moment. And then actually, I noticed myself over the years that as each agency kind of went through, they also went through their own rebranding and rethinking. And I think that also goes, you could say that black is often associated with the color of rebelliousness. A lot of luxury brands mainly use black and white logos. And so I think the funny little observation you make, it's something really interesting about this space of innovation. Thank you for this moniker of Innovation King, but I think a lot of times we are so focused about how to make sure people realize that we're standing out. And one, because we're pointing to a new direction, but sometimes it's also just to like define yourself and define who you are.
Interesting. And I counted there are at least 12 companies that you work for or work with within last 20 years. Are you a job hopper?
Am I a job hopper? I think if I think one of those adages goes about you're supposed to stay in a role for like 2 to 3 years, and less than that feels like very, very difficult. Maybe something that's built into me from when I was a kid. I really focused a lot on making my own mind up and making my own path. Like even reading all these books when I was a teenager. Maybe sometimes I read books that teenagers weren't reading. Got myself just into my mind that like I listen very much like everybody who is a product of America does. Carve your own path. And so as a result of that, I think I don't think of it as different jobs, but I think of it as deciding a tableau of experiences and skills that I really wanted to learn and acquire. And then to me, early on, I also decided that, getting inspired by like people from Darwin, these like pre pre-modern science thinkers who were kind of moving between science and humanities. They really collected a lot of different kinds of experiences, and for me, that is what kind of defines a really great thinker. And so, in that vein, I just kind of laid out some mental chapters for myself about, okay, as a good young Asian kid, my parents pushed me towards science and business. sorry, science first actually, and of course wanted me to be a doctor. And I think I thought I wanted to be a doctor for a long time until I did some medical research experience as a high school, and I thought I was going to be an MD PhD. And then one time I got to a lab at uni, and I was like, okay, this really isn't for me. And I like the thinking and I like all of the analytics and the deep dedication to learning, but it wasn't for me. So I'm going to keep adding on to my skill sets. And maybe I'm a slow learner, so I'll look at the world outside of what I'm doing, study, add in, and build. And so that's kind of how I think about my career. Is
Hmm.
it's not just like different jobs, but it was okay. If I want to master the space of science, what do I do? Then I tried that, and I was like, okay, this isn't exactly for me, but there's some things that I can blend into. So I moved into social sciences, and then I got my degree in economics. And then, as you do when you listen to the market, you think, okay, well, everybody's going into investment banking as an economics major, and so I went into that direction. That wasn't like totally the perfect fit for me. So then I went into what I thought was a good kind of marriage of the two, which was pursuing architecture and design, which I love and I still one of my passions today. The thing is you learn that architects really toil and go through a lot in their life, and so and I didn't feel like my design skills matched that kind of passion. And so I was like, what's the next closest space? And that's like this world of brand thinking, marketing strategy, thinking where you can design and your output can be a bit more agnostic. And then, each job to me has been an opportunity to learn a way of thinking, some skills and tools. And then, from role to role, it's about building and adding to the different skills.
That's quite interesting approach. And you already mentioned and start talking about your experiences in childhood, right? And then one of the events that I joined recently as well, you were talking about your background and the countries you've been to and all different backgrounds. So tell me more about it because I found it personally very, very inspiring.
Yeah. Well, I think from a little bit of your push, I actually didn't really talk a lot about my background for a while, and you know, you just get used to being focused on the thing you do, your career, your job, your school, and maybe in the last 5 to 8 years, I've reflected a lot more on how that has led me to be where I'm at. And to your point, like my parents are Cantonese and Vietnamese, and I was born in California, grew up in Texas, um, and that's a really crazy experience. I think you get so many different things happening at that moment, like growing up Asian, but also having this like influences. Um, One of the things I've gotten from my father, he was really passionate about languages,
Mm.
and so I think that thread is something that has really helped shape a lot of what and how I think. So he was an experimenter actually, and he would just try lots of different ways for me to try to learn Chinese. So from the age of 7 or 8, he was trying like Chinese Sunday school, and then that didn't really work because I begged my mom. I was like, oh, I don't like Chinese school. Mom, you don't, she didn't care. So she was like, okay, you don't have to go. And then the next thing was to try. He was like, well, maybe if he immerses with like a family that speaks Chinese at home, then he'll learn through osmosis. And, we went to visit, like, I stayed with my dad's friends for a summer, had an amazing time, great time, didn't learn any Chinese. Then he tried his old Chinese teacher from when he was a kid, and so at that time he was living in California, so I got sent to California for a summer. Again, I don't think we opened one single Chinese book while I was there, but I had an amazing time with Vincent, who was his grandson, and we just like hung out, went to the beach and the mall, watched a lot of movies. That was great. And then he was like, "Oh man, my dad is kind of like persistent, and so the last thing was he was like, all right, I'm gonna send him to live in Taipei with my cousin, and so I went to live with my uncle in Taipei when I was like an early teenager. And at first I was like, I don't know what's happening right now. But my uncle is he's a very thoughtful, persistent man. And so he created a routine, and we had Chinese class every day, and he's really passionate about calligraphy. So we had like calligraphy, and then I got into this summer program in Taipei where you kind of live in a dorm and learn Chinese. Um, and that really kind of just kick-started it. And then once it started, it was just much easier to keep going. We speak Vietnamese at home, and of course I speak English at school. So by that point, that was like three languages already. And then we learned Spanish in school.
Four.
I took Latin in high school for some reason, probably part of that doctor thing, thinking, oh yeah, doctors need to learn Latin. So I learned Latin for 2 years. Um, and by the time I got to college, um, I was like, okay, I'll take French. And so I took French. So I think language is probably one of those things that has shaped me and shaped both my passion to go explore different places. And then also, I think the process of language, you really learn, as you switch between different languages, there's like a thought process that goes with each language. And it's not just the words, you have to use the logic to be able to deploy the language in the way that it's meant to be deployed. If you try to use American logic to speak Chinese, it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't sound right. And it's the same with Vietnamese and French at the same time.
So you're fluent in 5 languages now.
I never try to claim fluency, but I do understand a few. Some of them come and go as they do. Like I can survive in Spanish to get around, like traveling, and a little bit of German, like because I spent some time in Germany as well. And I studied abroad. I think studying abroad is really huge, and then I lived and worked abroad as well. So I think, you know, you're getting to the heart of it. Really is um, something sparked in me about like what was the power of language to really kind of like ignite my curiosity about the world. And then once I started, it was just really hard to stop.
What's your China story? So you've been here already a couple of years. How did you end up in China after all these international experiences?
Um, yeah, I think China is probably like dovetail two things. One, uh, before coming to China, I was working more independently. I think along with that, my job hopping journey, as you'd say, I think, the piece of space that I really wanted to learn about was, innovation agencies. We often take this role of consultant. And I think that to do innovation, right, isn't just to sell innovation thinking or to sell a process, but is really to make an impact. And so I felt like you can't just do it from the consulting side. And so I did some periods where I was embedded, working more and more deeply on client side problems. And I think that really helped. And as I got into that, I was working on more and more stuff that was leaning towards China, right? Um, I definitely am not like an early kind of person who's jumped on the China bandwagon. Since I learned Chinese, I actually spent more time in Europe in my early career and worked with like US and European based brands. And China was always like one small piece of it. And I think from innovation standpoint, a lot of innovation is controlled and carried out by headquarters. Um, in the last few years, and we know definitely in the last 3 years, innovation has had to lean and point almost directly towards China, right? And I think that's when I was like, okay, maybe this is a good time to try it out. And so I had a few projects that took me here before, and then I got the opportunity to come to Shanghai with IDEO as a designer in resident, and really kind of just dove in and and just drinking from the fire hose of China. Then at the end of that period, you know, the team from What If, our CEO and chief growth officer, invited me to help us grow our business here in What If. So
Mm.
it kind of came from my curiosity, and you know, obviously this Chinese language thing really helped a lot, and it was just like probably the confluence of a couple factors, something about like innovation serendipity.
Hmm. We'll speak a little bit more about what if later, right? But for now, I want to ask you. So you've been already in innovation for quite some time, right? I think it's already reached 20 years. Um, and right now, everyone's talking about innovation.
Yeah.
Uh, all startups talking about innovation. All corporates talking about innovation. All governments talking about innovation. So it's kind of very buzzword that you hear all the time. But I can't imagine innovation 20 years ago. So if you can compare innovation now and then, what's different?
Um, 20 years ago, again, some of this is hard to sift from my own personal experience and then from the world. Because again, I was always reading these like weird nonfiction books in high school already, and so I think I had like I even read some like HBR articles as a teenager. I'd sit in the library and read these things about corporate development and organizational theory and about like I remember distinctly the first time, even in second grade, where they were talking about like an interactive TV in our textbook, right? And that image just stood in my mind, like this, you know, even until I worked in an innovation agency, and I think there were just like little clues that the world was heading in this direction, and in you know like the early 2000s, obviously we had like the dot-com boom, and there was a lot of initial forays into all of this. And I think innovation, to me, innovation's become something of a buzzword, but I think what I think of it as is it's moved from something that was on the edge or things that people thought about as like new or different, and it's really moved into the center where everybody should be really thinking about
Mm-hmm.
innovation. So, you know, that's why I kind of like chuckle at the idea of king of innovation, because in a way, innovation should be something everyone does. Over the years, I think at the beginning, we were working a lot with clients to like provide little stepping stones, you know, become more consumer centric, embrace things like design thinking, think about an end-to-end innovation process. At some point, we were helping to come up with ideas for clients, and then after they learned how to do it in a kind of holistic, outside in, inside out way, they started doing it themselves. And then as they started doing it themselves, they realized that there's some like human change that comes along with that. And so basically, I think what I've been lucky to is be on the edge, be involved with, and hopefully more and more just be an agent for promoting the power of innovation thinking to help make impact in people's lives. And I think that's one what I think innovation has been evolving towards. It's a thing that constantly evolves, um, which for my, you know, job hopping, curiosity driven life, I think is really well suited. And for the world, I think the main thing that I'm really passionate about is how do you use innovation to help make a difference in the lives of these people who are walking around the street, and then the lives of the people that we work with.
Interesting. And for what if now it's a part of Accenture, and now you're also a part of Accenture. So what was the transition? How did it happen? Was it challenging? Was it exciting? Tell me more about it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, What If has been going for 30 years, and you know, our founders came out of Unilever, um, you know, or a corporate life world where um, we were working with kind of that pre-innovation era where
Mm-hmm.
businesses, I think the way I like to explain it is businesses are made to run for today, right? It's uh, selling something, offering a service, making the money, and then just thinking about the horizon.
Mhm.
And a lot of what innovations helped businesses do is just think a little bit further ahead,
Mhm.
and be able to define new pathways for growth and new avenues for growth. The thing about us is, as an independent agency, I think this is something every startup feels, right? As you're working in your area or profession, at some point you realize you need more to be able to achieve your dreams. You don't want to just talk about things, you want to make them. You want to test them out. You don't want to just sell an idea, you want to sell a product, a service, or experience. So that happens with innovation agencies as well. And I think when the time came, like we were looking for, What If was looking for a place to connect and scale our impact. And I think that's one area where Accenture really excels. Accenture works with the world's biggest businesses to help fuel, you know, the change that we're seeing in the world at scale. And so in China, I think is a microcosm of that dynamic where What If's been in China for 15 years, and we've had some really great successes, great client experiences, great outcomes. But I think it's not that dissimilar to what
Mhm.
the Chinese market is like, right? China
Right.
is constantly changing and evolving, and at one point, you want to have a lot of outside advice. At one point, then you shift to having more local experience, capabilities, and approach, and then that's kind of the ebb and flow of, I think, consulting in China. So I think definitely one of the greatest challenges in my career to come here. And I actually, joined like 3 months before COVID. So that was really an adventure to take this on. Um, the biggest thing for us, I think, is getting our team and also Accenture really aligned around this sense that innovation thinking, as I said before, I don't think of it as like a methodology or a approach or even a process, but it's a way of thinking that can help us like look further ahead and identify like new unique problem and solutions to problems. And
Mhm.
so um, I absolutely think it's something that every business can use. But if I go back to my reference about languages, I think sometimes when you have a different mindset, it's like you're speaking different languages.
Mhm.
And so half of our challenge in doing, innovation thinking in China is being able to create like the interface between two different ways of thinking. The existing skills, experience, realms of expertise, and culture of China with some of these elements from a globally developed sense of innovation. And what our thesis is that for China, innovation is going to be taking, like every other thing that happens in China, taking the heart, the philosophy, the way of thinking, but not necessarily always honing true to the outcomes or the outside appearances of it, right?
Mhm.
So you have to, like that Picasso idea where you're not supposed to just copy, great artists steal.
Mhm.
And you're not just trying to copy the outside of what innovation looks like in a global market, but
Mm-mm.
actually to create a China for China style of innovation, really understand what's happening in this market, what are things that it's missing, and where do we borrow, where do we build off of from other um, systems of thinking.
If you can summarize very quickly the differences and similarities, innovation in China and innovation outside of China.
From my observation, I would say, again, this is like grossly reductive. So, just in broad strokes, I think innovation in this journey that we've had has often been very like stable, structured, um, methodical. Usually there's a stage gate process, and that comes from like our bigger corporate entities. Then, of course, we add in this layer of disruption that we have from lean, agile thinking, which has helped really also revolutionize the entire world. So we have this kind of mixture of some process, some systems of thinking, um, and that creates this like interesting hybrid. I think often it's easy to separate like the current business and the future business, and then be able to talk about the strategy and thinking, etc. I think China, on the other hand, I would say China is by far and large a market driven, you know, context, right? Everything is about market references, understanding the market, and kind of like attenuating where you sit in the market. And so in that case, um, you may not always, and the market does have some consumer context and some delivery and corporate context and something about the ecosystem, but you may not always have the time or the luxury to sit back and think, okay, how does this all link together? What's the end-to-end story from who we are as a business to how we show up with consumers, and what does that mean now and what does it mean in the future? And so to me, like a hybridized version is to be able to say, how do we move and understand with the market, move with the market and understand it enough to like speak in a Chinese like accurate context, and then how do we use some other systems of thinking from brand, from agile, from stage gate innovation to help link to things that people really care about and make it worthwhile and make it faster.
The final one, I would love to ask. So I think lots of people think that innovation is something that you kind of cannot gain, you cannot learn. But what do you think? Innovation is the muscle. Can you train it? And if yes, so what would be your piece of advice to those who want to improve and be a bit more creative and innovative at what they do?
We actually talk a lot about innovation as a muscle in What If. So I think a lot of the advice is, um, I think innovation is something that everybody wants, but sometimes when it comes into, it's like it is exactly like going to the gym. You know, like I also try to go to the gym. I'm not always successful, and sometimes we resist. And one of the things that I realize is um, when we resist, we often want to abandon and leave. But as with great training and great things that pay off, when you resist, you should try to listen and see, why are you resisting, right? Have a little moment of self-reflection. And often that resistance can lead you to unpack something that if you crack it for yourself, it'll help you open up to innovation. And then on top of that, just explore curiosity and thinking. For me, that's like something that's fueled how I think. Building in different ways of people who inspire you, different ways of thinking, and then collecting that into your own logic and thought process. Then it's not about like what is the process or what's the buzzword, but it's like what's the new logic and how do you take in new information and try things out. I guess the short and sweet version is, um, when things get hard, have a chance to like really reflect on it and what you want out of this experience. And when it's hard, kind of think about who you can use as a reference and support system to get through it. When you push through it, often it shows you something new and something interesting. And then as you go through, build your curiosity and keep experimenting.
Anthony, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing all these tips and insights. And I wish you best of luck on your entrepreneurial and innovation journey, and want to see more innovative things coming out from your team in the future. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. Loved it.
That was In China Between Meeting with Anthony Leung. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and see you next time.